Welcome back to another in our series of great chapters in the Bible. Our chapter today comes from the Old Testament prophet Daniel. Daniel chapter 6, the lion's den. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdoms 120 satraps, to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, "We shall find no ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects of the satraps, the counselors, and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction, that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the lion's den. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document, so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked." Therefore, King Darius signed the document and injunction. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house, where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, "O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions?" The king answered and said, "The thing stands fast, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked." Then they answered and said before the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day." Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed, and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, "Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians, that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed." Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." And a stone was brought and laid in the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night there fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Then, at break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no harm." Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, "Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever, His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. According to the Oxford Dictionary, a character flaw is a fault or weakness in a person's character. Writers thrive on character flaws. For instance, the character of Captain Hook in Peter Pan was obsessed with Peter Pan. Captain Ahab in Moby Dick was obsessed with killing the whale. Character flaws can be things like cruelty or fixations, immaturity, meddlesomeness, paranoia, skepticism, or self-righteousness, to name a few. On the other hand, character strengths are those which hold a person to ideals and moral living. These are things like hope or creativity, grit, self-control, or prudence, to name a few. These are the moral fiber of an individual that leads their lives. These don't guarantee that a person will never make a mistake, but they help the person lead an upright life and follow a path that is straight and narrow, so to speak. When laid side by side, character flaw and character strength are easily identifiable. Those with character flaws might not identify their deficits as that which often leads them astray, but those with character strengths might not laud their own virtues, yet they are aware of them nonetheless. That leads us to one of the most destructive of all character flaws that a person can possess. This trait is so overwhelming, so powerful, so utterly dark, as to make many other flaws seem insignificant by comparison. It destroys relationships, homes, marriages, careers, even countries. What is this devilish and dark trait? None other than jealousy. We may have a minor flaw that makes us quirky. We may have a major flaw that hinders and restricts us. But when we have a fatal flaw that brings about our downfall, it is unrelenting. That's what jealousy is, a fatal flaw. Can anyone truly say that there is a usefulness in jealousy? Is there a good aspect of this trait in which we can build a life upon? No, absolutely not. And that's what we have at the heart of our chapter today. A group of men so jealous of Daniel's rise to power under the new ruler, Darius. After all, he was a Jew and not one of them. That's what lies at the heart of jealousy, the success of others. That success they could not stand for Daniel to have. But how to tear him down to bring us up? His religion. That's the key. We read in verse 5, "Then these men said, 'We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God.'" That was their fatal flaw. There is a universally unspoken 11th commandment. Thou shalt not pick on God's people. The Babylonians found that out. The Edomites found that out. Pharaoh of Egypt found that out. The Syrians found that out. Now these high officials, satraps, prefects, counselors, and governors are about to meet their own undoing. Skeptics have scoffed at this chapter, decrying how any ruler could be so naive as to sign into law such an edict as this without realizing the consequences. But why is it that secular history looks down at sacred writing so often as unreliable and fictional? Well, they too will one day find themselves on the wrong side of history. However, lest we spend all our time on those who sought to bring about Daniel's downfall, let's look at the virtues of our hero today. When Daniel discovered the edict, he wasn't gripped by fear. Daniel continued on praying and giving thanks. Though unnamed in Hebrews chapter 11, that hall of faith of heroes, Daniel is nonetheless referenced there. We read in Hebrews 11, verses 32 and 33, "And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouth of lions." Wait, did you catch that? Stopped the mouth of lions. Yes, Daniel has been a guiding light for the young and old alike through the ages. He may have had flaws, yet his strength of character led him time after time and will continue to lead us today by example. Now, when you think of those whom you would emulate your life after, can it be said of any that are driven by jealousy that you would pick that as your model? Lord willing, let's meet here again tomorrow and look at another of the great chapters in the Bible.